All right, let's jump straight into the strategic briefing on China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, if you want to understand modern geoeconomics, you absolutely have to understand the BRI. And we're not just talking about a massive infrastructure project here. This is a grand strategy, carefully designed to completely rewire global trade pathways, economic dependencies, and security structures. In this explainer, we're going to break down its exact mechanics, the real strategic drivers behind it, and the growing geopolitical pushback it's facing today. Here is our agenda. 1. Anatomy of the BRI. 2. Hidden strategic motivations. 3. Implications for India. 4. Global geopolitical impact. 5. Pushback and way forward. And 6. Our rapid revision recap. Section 1. Anatomy of the BRI. So, back in 2014 at the APEC summit, President Xi Jinping officially unveiled this initiative. And to truly grasp the strategy, you have to understand its two main arteries. First, you have the land-based SREB, the Silk Road Economic Belt. Think of this as a massive Eurasian bridge running from Xi'an in China straight through Central Asia all the way to Europe. Then you have the sea-based MSR, the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. This one originates in Fujian province, passes right through the critical Strait of Malacca, over to Africa, and eventually merges back with the land route in the Mediterranean. This dual structure is absolutely crucial because it directly impacts both continental trade and Indo-Pacific maritime security simultaneously. And they didn't just announce a grand vision and hope for the best. They backed it up instantly with a staggering $40 billion Silk Road Fund, established right alongside the announcement. This proved from day one that the BRI was a fully financed, operational geoeconomic engine, ready to initiate immediate construction and lock in strategic partners right out of the gate. To put the macro scale of this into perspective and to really understand the geopolitical stakes, the BRI blueprint targets over 60 countries. We are talking about 60% of the global population and regions that hold roughly 33% of the world's GDP. By controlling the connectivity that links 60% of humanity, Beijing is essentially positioning itself to dictate the future of global commerce. Section 2. Hidden Strategic Motivations. Now, officially, Beijing will tell you the BRI is all about prosperity for its underdeveloped Western provinces, boosting regional integration, and securing energy needs. But as analysts, we have to look at the unstated military objectives. The real strategy here is exporting their massive domestic industrial overcapacity, countering perceived U.S. containment, and crucially, securing access for the People's Liberation Army Navy, the plan, to a vast network of ports stretching all the way to the Arabian Sea. The ultimate, absolute goal? Overcoming what they call the Malacca vulnerability by establishing overland supply routes that completely bypass the heavily monitored South China Sea. These hidden motivations actually take physical shape in the form of 6 main economic corridors. Now, as we map these out, pay very close strategic attention to 2 in particular: the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, and the Bangladesh-China-India-Myanmar Corridor, or BCIM. Because these infrastructure arteries literally surround India, fundamentally altering the security architecture of the entire immediate neighborhood. Which brings us to Section 3, Implications for India. Through this initiative, China is rapidly emerging as a formidable dual continental maritime power. They're actively constricting the space for Russia in Central Asia and the US in the North Pacific. But for New Delhi, the risk here is incredibly acute. If the BRI rolls on unchallenged, India faces the very real strategic threat of being structurally marginalized. They risk either being forced into becoming a subordinate gear in a Chinese-dominated machine or being pushed entirely to the margins of both land and maritime Asia. India saw this coming early on and drew a hard line, fundamentally rejecting the BRI to protect its strategic autonomy. The primary trigger for this rejection? China's utter disregard for Indian sovereignty. CPEC, the crown jewel of the BRI, passes directly through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, which is territory legally belonging to India. On top of that, New Delhi holds deep and entirely valid concerns that these supposedly commercial logistics bases and ports will inevitably be leveraged for dual military use by the Chinese Navy. Let's pivot to Section 4, Global Geopolitical Impact. You have likely heard the term debt trap diplomacy. Well, this is the primary mechanism driving that global impact. Instead of offering grants, Beijing extends massive, highly opaque loans to strategically located developing countries. And when these self-serving infrastructure projects inevitably fail to generate the promised economic returns, the host nations are left ensnared in completely unsustainable debt. This results in deep political compliance and, in some cases, the direct loss of national sovereignty. The fallout from this strategy is catastrophic and highly visible. Just look at Sri Lanka. China poured over $1.2 billion into the Hambantota deepwater port. When slow economic growth meant Sri Lanka couldn't service that massive debt, they were heavily pressured into handing China a 99-year lease on the port. This severely compromised Sri Lankan sovereignty and paved the way for planned surveillance ships to visit the region, significantly straining ties with India. Meanwhile, look at Pakistan. An estimated $19 billion out of their $90 billion foreign debt is owed strictly to China through CPEC. Beijing is now by far their absolute largest bilateral lender. And this tactic spans continents. Over in Africa, we saw massive global controversies erupt over reports that the Ugandan government was at serious risk of forfeiting a vital strategic asset, the Entebbe International Airport, just to settle unpaid Chinese loans. Now, Beijing naturally issued denials, but the incident perfectly illustrates the inherent predatory risks tied to BRI lending. Now, remember this staggering figure from World Bank estimates? $385 billion. That is the minimum amount of hidden debt owed to China by 165 different countries who funded their projects through the BRI. But here's the real kicker. Nearly 70% of that money went straight back to China's own state-owned companies that were awarded the construction contracts in the first place. This isn't just about building roads. It's a massive, intentional shift in global geoeconomics and supply chain dependency. Section 5. Pushback and Way Forward. So let's break down exactly how this exploitation cycle operates in 4 clear steps. Step 1. Target low and middle income countries, heavily favoring pliable leaders like monarchs or authoritarians. Step 2. Enforce opaque, completely secret agreements where the terms are hidden from the public. Step 3. Build self-serving infrastructure that benefits China's economy, not necessarily the host nations. And Step 4. Upon inevitable debt default, swoop in and demand control of strategic national assets. But here's the thing. The world is waking up and the pushback is real and accelerating. While CPEC launched aggressively back in 2015, fast forward to October 2020, and Bangladesh outright canceled the Sonadia Deep Seaport project, along with multiple railway lines. And this resistance is ongoing. Malaysia successfully pushed back and renegotiated rail projects to slash costs by a third, while Myanmar heavily downsized a massive port project by a quarter. Nations are actively fighting back to reclaim their economic sovereignty. Finally, Section 6, Rapid Revision Recap. Okay, let's lock this in. Take a mental screenshot of these core facts. Origins unveiled at the 2014 APEC Summit, backed immediately by a $40 billion fund. Architecture relies on the land-based SREB and the sea-based MSR. The real strategic goal? Bypassing the Malacca vulnerability and securing naval access for the plan. India's stance? A firm rejection because CPEC violates sovereignty and POC. And the global impact? Textbook debt trap diplomacy, leaving 165 nations owing a staggering $385 billion, resulting in asset seizures like the 99-year lease of Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. So, I want to leave you with this final strategic question to think about. Will the Belt and Road Initiative successfully forge a unipolar, Chinese-dominated global network? Or will this accelerating collective pushback from nations who actually value their strategic autonomy pave the way for a truly multipolar Indo-Pacific? How this plays out is going to define the geopolitical landscape for the rest of this century.